Thank God it's
Welcome back to the Friday Show, presented this week by the Match Series, which just kicked off last weekend. We'll talk more about that coming up. Plus, of course, the Kentucky Derby is right around the corner. We've got to talk about that. But first, Ray, since you were there, I want to bring this up first, and that is Frank Stronach held a meeting this week in Southern California at a hotel after putting an ad in the paper. And, people showed up, and then he sat in front of them, and he talked about the company that owns Santa Anita and Laurel Park and Gulfstream Park, the Stronach Group, and how, since Belinda, his daughter, took it over, how things have gone. He doesn't have very nice things to say about his daughter. So I'm just wondering what it was like to be there. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, like a lot of things that Frank Stronach has done, it wasn't conventional. It's no secret that he has sued his daughter over her alleged mismanagement of the company. We'll leave that up to the courts to decide whether that's true or not. And in so doing, he is no longer actively involved in the management of the company. He stepped down voluntarily to run for office in politics in his native Austria. And now he sort of wants his company back, even though he laid the foundation for Belinda to take it over and to run it. She countersued in court, claiming that he lost hundreds of millions of dollars on passion projects. Bottom line, he has nothing to do with Santa Anita, at least until the courts determine otherwise. And so he was laying out his vision for Santa Anita, which is a little weird because that would be like me laying out my vision for General Motors. I don't have anything to do with General Motors anymore. Well, ever, in fact.
Yeah.
Unlike Frank, who created the company. So what he wants to do, even though he has no power over this, is to take the racetrack portion of his assets, say Santa Anita, the track itself, the grandstand, the stable area, and turn that over to a trust to be run by what he called stakeholders, the horsemen and others, to run in perpetuity. But the rest of the property, a lot of the parking lot, can be developed into hotels or restaurants, etc. The horsemen loved it, of course. It'd be like saying, do you like candy? Yes, I like candy. Because he's saying, we're going to give this to you. So they were very receptive to it.
Yeah, I'm sure they were. Is there any way this happens?
Well, the only way it happens will be dependent on either this lawsuit going through the process, which will take considerable time, I think, or if he and Belinda Stronach can come to some sort of an agreement. Now, is the idea of putting these tracks into a trust a bad idea? I don't think so necessarily, but I don't see the necessity of doing it. He said, without giving any details, that Belinda and the management of the Stronach Group don't want to have racing anymore and they want to sell the property for development. My question would be, if they want to sell the property, why are they doing all these things to address the safety issues that have come up at this meeting? Why did they just this week hire Dion Benson to be the medical director for the Stronach Group based in Southern California to oversee these improvements? Why would she be investing so much of her time to try to save Santa Anita?
Yeah, it makes little sense, and I don't know what's going on there. Frank Stronach voluntarily stepped away from the company. He's 86 years old now. So it's sad to see a family torn apart like that. And it's not very constructive for the industry as a whole. In fact, the meeting, the way I read your account of it, turned into, an example of what's going on in the industry right now with animal rights group supporters trying to have their say, and then people shouting them down. And then you had owner Gary Hartunian of Rockingham Ranch standing up and saying the horses need their medication and the jockeys need their whips. It just sounds like it devolved.
Yeah, there were some strange things. The one thing that Frank and Belinda have very much common ground on is their belief that horses are over-medicated. They're both supportive of the Horse Racing Integrity Act. Frank has spent a lot of time in Washington. I think Belinda is doing that too. The difference is he was waiting for federal legislation to get passed, which may never happen. And she said, "Look, in California, we're just going to do this. We're not going to wait for the rest of the industry. We're going to change the rules here." And now California has the most stringent medication rules in the country, and she's trying to get the whip eliminated from racing as far as using it to encourage horses. She wants jockeys to carry whips for steering and safety purposes only. And that's a big thing to the general public. California is unique from other states. They have ballot initiatives, which we've talked about before, and there is a very real concern that horse racing could end up on a ballot initiative, which means the people in California would have an up or down vote should horse racing go away. If that goes on the ballot, there's a very good chance horse racing will go away. And even if it goes on the ballot, the tracks and the horsemen's groups are going to have to spend millions and millions of dollars to try to protect it. So any way you look at it, a ballot initiative is not good for horse racing, and there are very real concerns that it's going to happen.
I do wonder whether these initiatives, and they're positive ones, like what the Stronach Group is doing, and that coalition that announced, the phasing out of Lasix for juveniles and stakes races, a coalition of most of the tracks in the country, at least the major ones. I do wonder whether that is unintentionally or intentionally going to undermine the federal legislation efforts, the Horse Racing Integrity Act. Because it sounds like they're trying to get in front of this, self-regulate, get rid of Lasix for the most part on race day, and then, where is the support for the Horse Racing Integrity Act? I just wonder if it's going to wane in light of the recent developments.
Well, I think that's probably part of the reason. But the bottom line from Tuesday night's talk by Frank Stronach is that he wants to do something that he currently does not have the authority to do. And until he gets authority to run the company again, Santa Anita will go on as it is.
Well, let's move on and talk about the Kentucky Derby, which is just a few days away now. We have the field mostly set, it looks like. Maybe there'll be defections at the beginning of next week. We got the draw coming up early next week, so that's going to be a critical factor as always. And we have the storylines that are developing. Primarily you have a handful of trainers who haven't won the Derby but have had, major success in the industry, like Steve Asmussen, Hall of Famer, Bill Mott, Hall of Famer, and then Richard Mandella, Hall of Famer. And none of them have won the Derby. And then you have Bob Baffert sitting there with 5 Kentucky Derby trophies. So which way is this going to go?
And with 3 contenders in this year's Derby.
Right. So which way is it going to go?
I think this is. I think it's time for someone to win the Derby that's never won it before. That's just my opinion, because Richard Mandella has a very good horse in this year's Kentucky Derby. Bill Mott has a very good horse, and he's got a second horse that I think a lot of people are going to start paying attention to Derby week. And Steve Asmussen has Long Range Toddy, who didn't win the Arkansas Derby, but he's got a chance in the Kentucky Derby. I think Mark Casse with War of Will seems to be improving off his terrible effort down in Louisiana. Another top-class trainer that has yet to win the Derby. So I think this is the year we're going to see a new face in the winner's circle.
At the top of that list, of course, is Omaha Beach, Mandella's trainee. And when Mike Smith chose that horse over Roadster, obviously that put a big stamp of approval on the favoritism that he's probably going to have on Derby Day. And then, as you mentioned, Bill Mott has a couple of horses that have really good chances in Tacitus and Country House, is that second horse you mentioned,
yeah,
who may end up being the wise guy horse, but certainly a Bill Mott trainee. In my book, I'm giving him a chance on Derby Day. And then Steve Asmussen, Long Range Toddy, is an interesting closer. The oldest jockey to ever ride in the Kentucky Derby will be John Court, 58 when he rides Long Range Toddy. So that's a good storyline as well. And, we will be on site. I'll be on site next week from Louisville to report on developments with the Triple Crown News Minute. And, of course, we'll do the Friday show from Louisville next week. The match series, Ray, it kicked off. I heard good things about last weekend, and it sounded like full fields and great weather.
Yeah, and I think the launch of the series at Laurel Park, great weather, big fields, and the fact that they're putting these races together on one card versus stringing them all different weeks and so on. I think it proved that it's a good new format they put together. The next stop is June 1st at Penn National. All 4 divisions again will be represented.
All right, I have a poll question for our audience to ponder. We talked about the trainer issue with the Kentucky Derby. So what's it going to be? Will a trainer win the Kentucky Derby for the first time this year? One of the guys we mentioned, or someone else in the field who's never won it? Let us know at paulickreport.com. Share your thoughts. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show presented by the Match Series. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.